Why did the early church reject the Gospel of Peter and instead go with the other four Gospels that used in the canon of the New Testament? When you consider that in the early days of the church there was quite a lot of people writing things and claiming that they were the genuine gospel of Jesus Christ, with that in mind, how was the early church supposed to decide what was genuine and what wasn't? This was one of the questions that a certain Sheikh Adnan Rashid asked of a pastor, Rudolf Boshoff, in a debate they had on YouTube. Let's just have a look at an extract from that.
The Gospel of Peter was on par with the Gospel of Mark. In fact, the manuscript evidence tells us that the Gospel of Peter was far more circulated than the Gospel of Mark itself, because we find more manuscripts for the Gospel of Peter than we find for the Gospel of Mark. Why was it rejected? Who threw it out is the question.
If I'm honest about it, I'm not a big fan of these kind of debates that you have on YouTube. And I suppose really the main reason for that is that there's a lot of questions asked, a lot of statements made, challenges put out there that really there's not enough time to take them on and to challenge them, which can lead to an end result where it looks like that those were valid made statements when actually they may be totally incorrect. There may be a big mistake. But that aside, Adnan does ask a good question here. So it needs to be looked at. But before I get into that, I just want to correct one error that he made. He said that the volume of manuscripts for the Gospel of Peter was far greater than that of the Gospel of Mark. And that is far from correct, to be honest. In actual fact, for the Gospel of Peter, at this time, we really only have one decent manuscript, which was only discovered in 1882, 86. I think 86, discovered in the grave of an Egyptian monk in the desert in Egypt, of course. And there's about 3 other fragments of manuscripts that we have that some people think may be part of the Gospel of Peter, but the quality is so poor it's hard to tell. So we've only really got that one. Whilst on the other hand, for Matthew's Gospel, we've got literally hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts. We've got complete versions, which to be honest are the newer ones, obviously, the complete ones. And then we've got fragments, some dating back to as far back as the 2nd century, the middle of the 2nd century. For Matthew's Gospel, possibly the oldest manuscript we have dates back to about 150 CE, 150 to 250 CE. That's the oldest we have at the moment, because who's to say what may get dug up any day now that may be older. All that aside, so why did the early church reject the Gospel of Peter? Well, a number of the reasons. One of the first reasons is to do with timing. Whilst the manuscript that we found in the grave of the Egyptian monk is believed to date back to about the 8th or 9th century CE, Bible scholars, and that includes people like Bart Ehrman, who Muslims love to quote because he's a Bible scholar, particularly the New Testament, but an atheist, and Christians love to quote him because he's a Bible scholar and he's an atheist. Interesting position there. I'll have to do a video at some point on Bart Ehrman and what I actually think of him. You might be surprised. It might be different to what you expect with me being a Bible-believing Christian. But anyway, I digress. So these Bible scholars generally believe that the writing was round about the middle of the 3rd century, so 250 CE, about that period. So it makes it far too late to have been written at the original time, of course, of the Gospels. So it wouldn't have even been able to be in the mix, because the people who were putting together the first canon of the Gospels of the New Testament wouldn't have even had it available to choose. The second reason is because some of the doctrine in it is believed to be of a Gnostic nature. Gnostic was quite a widespread cult that started. Nobody's quite sure when it started. It could have even possibly predated Christianity, but became adopted certain Christian principles into it. But the Gnostics generally, even though they believed a lot of wide different things depending on which person you followed in the religion, one of them that was quite common was something called Docetism, okay, which believed that Jesus didn't appear in the flesh. He just appeared that way. It just looked like he was in the flesh, but he actually wasn't. He was like a ghost spirit kind of person. And an add-on to that as well is, interestingly enough, is that they don't believe that he actually died on the cross. He just appeared that way, and then he was taken up. In the Gospel of Peter, it says that he was taken up directly from the cross. So interesting. Where have we heard that before? A third reason, and this is more my own reasoning, but I think I believe obviously it's a valid point, is that it actually distinctly declares itself to be written by Peter, the brother of Andrew, who was one of the early disciples, which obviously it couldn't have been, because it came too late. So to me, if you're going to lie about that and try to get some authority for what you've written by claiming to be somebody else, i.e. one of Jesus's original disciples, then it calls the whole thing into question. So on that grounds, I would reject it as well. Another point on the question of the other Gospels, because there were a lot of different Gospels put forward. So there was, for example, there was the one of Judas, there was Mariam or Mary, Gospel of Thomas was another popular one. They all seem to have one common theme, two common themes actually. They tend to come late, so they were a bit late for the party, so to speak. So too late to go into the original mix of the canon. But the other thing is they all have this habit, and say all of them, probably the large majority, have this habit of being of this having this doctrine of Docetism, okay, where they don't believe in the physical appearance of Jesus in a body, that he came and dwelt in a body on earth, and that's a common theme. So they're the reasons why these Gospels get rejected, whilst the other four Gospels that we have accepted, namely Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, all in agreement, follow a common theme, and they have an early witness. What I mean by early witness is people quoted them from the early on, so early church fathers, and I'm talking about literally right back in the first century. We're quoting from them and telling us who the authors were, because sometimes we didn't know. So we only know that Mark's Gospel was written by Mark because we're told that by the early church fathers. Similar story for Matthew. The Gospels of John and the Gospels of Luke, we have further evidence towards that they're the authors. But that's really the subject for another video, I would say. So thank you for listening. Hope it was of use to you. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please feel free to place comments below, and I'll see you next time.